Okay, you guys, I'm back. I said we were live. We actually weren't live.
Okay.
So my fault. But now we are. We are completely live right now. It's Michelle, Living Blue in Texas, with on the Texas Mind Networks with Kevin Morris. He's running for Texas legislator in Collin County, and Juan Gatica, who's running for county commissioner in Lubbock. Kevin, do you want to start off and introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. My name's Kevin Morris. I'm running for Texas House of Representatives, District 67 in Collin County. I have a very unique district that I'm representing because with areas such as Plano, Allen, and McKinney, it encompasses some very large, dense urban areas.
Yeah.
But I also have very rural, less populated areas, Farmersville, Blue Ridge, Anna Melissa, Princeton, Lucas. So there's a lot of different areas. And then there's some unincorporated towns as well in the area. So I am running for Collin County to just be a voice to represent everybody who has kind of gotten lost in the shuffle of corporate greed and Republicans serving special interests over people. And I am here to change that. I'm here to serve people over special interests. And I'm here to fight for my community.
Perfect. And just a side note, Collin County has some of the highest property taxes in Texas. And this is a discussion about property taxes. So, John, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Juan Gatica, and I'm a former educator. I'm a retired educator. So obviously my platform is going to be focusing on education and how the property taxes is affecting education in rural America. I'm running for county commissioner in Lubbock, precinct 2, which again is the rural area southeast of Lubbock, in a small community of Slayton and some areas in that and in southeast Lubbock. But again, property taxes obviously coincide and is run hand in hand with what's happening in the educational system. That's probably my biggest concern is the monies that the state is not giving rural America because of Senate Bill 2 and how it affects each small district, while in the urban districts where the property taxes are going out the roof, that's not necessarily the case in rural America. And so while our taxes are being cut, so is our funding. And so those are the kind of concerns that we're having in rural America as opposed to urban cities.
Right. And so the reason that we decided to have this conversation is because within the last week or two, a lot of people in Texas got their, annual appraisal thing here, that, our house appraised at much, much, much higher than the year before. And in turn, property taxes go up. We have been hearing from Republicans for 20 years, 30 years, I don't know how long, a long time, that they're going to lower property taxes. Yet, what we've seen in Texas, we are now the fifth highest. We have the fifth highest property taxes in America. So our property taxes are higher than California. They're higher than Florida. They're just, through the roof. So what do you think that is contributed to? Why do taxes keep going up so high? And I know, John, you kind of mentioned on it a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, I wasn't sure if this was for me or for John. Well, the real estate right now it's a huge driving factor in Collin County. Collin County is experiencing so much growth, and there is such low housing inventory. I have a couple personal acquaintances of mine that are realtors, and they've been telling me for the last 6 months to a year that the inventory on hand for homes in Collin County is less than 1 month's inventory. What that does is that drives house prices through the roof. So you're getting a lot of people right now that are going a lot of times sight unseen. You're just getting into bidding wars where you're paying $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 above what the asking price is just to get into a home. Mm-hmm. So you're seeing a lot of first-time buyers turned off, and they're getting into, they're getting outbid it's incredibly unsustainable what we're in right now. But the property taxes are a result of just this nonstop bidding war to drive home prices up through the roof.
Yeah. And so I have a little clip here that I want to play for everybody. And this is from Mike Collier, who is running for the lieutenant governor. And it's kind of an explanation, a little bit about why taxes have been going up.
You're running for Texas lieutenant governor. I thought with appraisals coming, I thought I'd share with the Texans why it is we're getting ripped off on our property taxes, and you're getting your appraisal notices, and you're going to see that appraisals are going to be way up. And that's a great thing about Texas, because the value of our homes always go way up. But it causes us to get ripped off on property taxes, and I'm going to show you how this works. Now, I'm going to build a conceptual model. I can walk you through the real numbers. That takes a long time, but I want to show you in a conceptual way why it is that we're being cheated on our property taxes. And I'm going to focus on school funding, because that's a big piece of the puzzle. And I'm going to ignore for a minute federal money and just talk about what happens here in the state. Schools get their money from two sources: local property taxes collected by the school districts and state support. Now let's imagine a hypothetical year. Year one, let's imagine that property taxes are 50, state support 50, total for schools 100. All right? It's a conceptual frame. Now it's time to do the year two budget. How do you suppose this works? Where do you think the legislature starts? They start here. And they say, Dan Patrick says, no more money for public schools. Then they come up here and they get economists to go out and say, how much more money is going to come in from local property taxes? Appraisals are going to go up. Taxes are going to go up. 50 is going to become 60. Imagine that. Homeowners are going to be paying more. So the state, therefore, gets to pay less. And that's why they're shifting the burden of taxes onto our backs. And they've been doing this for decades. Now, you might suggest that if the state's putting in less money, maybe the state has more money than it needs. What are they going to do with that money? A surplus. I'll tell you exactly what Dan Patrick did when he first took office as lieutenant governor, and he looked at the state's books, and he saw surplus driven by higher and higher property taxes on us. But he sees a surplus, and what does he do? Cuts the margin tax for the big corporations, therefore shifting the burden from the big corporations onto our backs as homeowners. No one has done this more aggressively, more intentionally than Dan Patrick. And all he talks about is cutting property taxes. And it's nonsense.
So do you agree with that assessment, John?
Yeah, I mean, I just talked to the superintendent before I got on this call,
Mhm.
and I asked him. I said, "Man, tell me what Senate Bill 2 has done for your school district." He said, "Well, so it's unkept promises." Basically, is what he said. He says, "So," he says, "theoretically, our taxes or our property taxes are supposed to be rising, meaning that we're getting more revenue."
Yeah.
He says, but that's not the case everywhere. But if it were, okay, we would be getting more revenue from our local businesses and from property taxes. So, okay, so our maintenance and operations were good. You know, we're going to get this number, the $50 he's talking about. He said, so then when we noticed that, it says, okay, look, we're gonna lower property taxes to give local businesses, local communities back their money, and because the property taxes are going to be raising, so you're going to get more money. So in order to offset that, we'll lower the percentage of taxes that you're getting, you know, from $1.14 to $1.04 per 100 valuation. It says, and you're going to get the same amount of money because the state is going to come in there and give you the difference that you're going to lose. And that's what Senate Bill talks about, is that Senate Bill 2 talks about is that whatever you lose, don't worry about it, because we're going to come in there and supplement the difference. So if you're losing $200,000 a year, we're going to write you a check for $200,000. So everything's going. So, but that's not what happened. So while they compressed their taxes from 114 to 104, and they lost X number of dollars, the state came back in and said they only gave them about 60%, if that much, of the 100% they were supposed to receive. So now the districts are struggling because they're not receiving the amount that they were getting for the $114 per dollar valuation. So so that's where the districts are right now. They're struggling because they're not getting the money that was promised to them.
Yeah.
For the money they were going to lose because of the property evaluations.
Okay. And so that's interesting. Do we know the reason why they're not giving the whole 100%?
That's kind of the $1 million question. If we knew that, they said, look, we've got money to supplement what you're going to lose, so don't worry. But that's not the case.
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't know what they plan on doing about, but they only got about 60% back from the state.
And so I believe the year was like 1990 or something like that, federal judges called Texas education system unconstitutionally underfunded. And we have not changed the way that we fund our education system, in decades. And the recapture system has not been effective, and it has driven the property taxes through the roof. What are your thoughts about that, Kevin?
So many thoughts. Property tax, it's interesting to me on a personal note in this race because I'm running against Jeff Leach, who he filed a bill a few years ago that required a 2/3 majority to enact a state income tax. However, the Republicans have found a way to essentially make an income tax through property taxes. And I mean, it's not, when we have no transparency like we have here in Texas right now, and we don't see where these dollars are going, and we feel like these dollars are going to budget the state, to balance the state's budget, it feels like a property tax. It really does. That's what I'm hearing from people in my district. So there's a lot that I think people might be able to tolerate a little bit of what's going on if there was some transparency and we saw where the dollars were going. For instance, Plano ISD, which is my home district, they're paying back $200 million a year in recapture funds, and they're running at a deficit. So we have well-funded districts that are running at deficits right now, and we have no idea where those dollars are going. But personally, my property taxes are going up $1,000 a year. None of this makes sense. It's something that we need answers for. We need transparency. We need to at least see where the dollars are going. But all of this is unsustainable, in my opinion.
Yeah. And that's the reason why Texas is now the 5th highest, for property taxes in America, because, we just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and our taxes just keep going up and up and up and up and up and up. And like you said, you've got a well-funded education system, but you're at a deficit. That just doesn't make sense. What about for Lubbock County? What about for the education, the recapture program in Lubbock County? How's that working out?
Well, I really can't speak to Lubbock as far as the recapture system. I know that Lubbock, I live outside of Lubbock, but I know that every school district in West Texas, which is Lubbock, and it is struggling because of funding. Obviously, there's just so many things that we're struggling with. When we talk about having $4 billion of unallocated funds, what we could do because of the pandemic is invested in broadband, and so we saw the significance in the disparity between school systems when the pandemic hit and we couldn't allow students to get online because we didn't have the infrastructure in place.
Yeah.
And yet we have $4 billion of unallocated funds, and we don't want to use those funds to do that. and to be a little proactive in what could be coming down the road. There's so many things that we are struggling with now, because of funding, teacher, salaries, things like that are pushing teachers away from the profession. And I think there's so many things and so many dynamics that are going on in the school system that people are just kind of, people talk about defunding police, and I think this is just a measure of defunding schools, public schools for that matter. And I think it's just kind of they just kind of doing it in a roundabout way. And I think when you see students in public schools struggling because of funds not being appropriated for them, I think you're going to see a large discrepancy between private and public schools, and I think that's what the state wants, actually.
Yeah, with the voucher system for sure. And ironically, we talk about this $4 billion that came from the coronavirus pandemic relief fund. That's about the same amount it's going to cost us to build a wall at the border. And the wall at the border, I mean, that doesn't affect me in North Texas. It doesn't affect you in West Texas. So I don't know. I think it's a little ironic.
Well, I smile when you say that, because I go to South Texas quite often, and in 2022, if we feel that a physical barrier is going to keep people from coming into a country, I think that we need to revisit that thought process. It's I mean, this is 2022. There's a lot of ways to get into the country without having to worry about a wall. It's X number of miles long, and I think that's very myopic in the thought processes.
Yeah. Yep. I completely agree with you. So I do have another video. This video is from Beto, and it's some of his ideas about how to lower property taxes. And I want to get you guys' thoughts on it afterwards. So let me play that clip.
My appraisal notice, but when you open it, make sure you're sitting down. Under Greg Abbott's leadership, property taxes have gone up $20 billion, an increase of 40%. When you add this increase to the other inflation that he's causing, the increase that we're seeing in utility bills and his mishandling of the electricity grid, this stunt that he pulled over the last 2 weeks on the U.S.-Mexico border, causing inflation at the grocery store. Greg Abbott also vetoed the Universal Service Fund, meaning for our rural neighbors, their costs for internet and phone are going up, and he is the single greatest driver of inflation in the state of Texas. Here are a few ideas for how we're going to bring property tax relief. Number one, we do not have enough housing in this state. Governor, I'm going to work with local leadership to make sure that we address this desperate shortage. Number two, corporations and the very wealthiest are getting out of their fair share. The law under Greg Abbott allows them to bring down their bills by billions of dollars. As governor, I'm going to work with the legislature to ensure that corporations have to essentially follow the same practices that we as homeowners have to follow. Third, I'm going to work with the legislature to make sure that the state of Texas is funding its fair share of public education. And lastly, look at new sources of income. Medicaid expansion. You no longer have to foot the bill for indigent health care at our public hospitals, legalizing marijuana. We spend $500 million a year locking people up for a substance that is legal in most of the rest of the country. We also lose out on, conservatively speaking, $500 million in tax revenue. Those are 4 ways that we can reduce the property tax burden on our fellow Texans and do something to change this inflation that we're seeing in Texas, thanks to Greg Abbott.
Okay. So what do you guys think? Do you guys think that Beto's ideas will lower property taxes?
I think he's on the right track. I love some of his ideas. I'm glad that he's pushing the benefits of legalization of cannabis. It is about $1 billion total in not prosecuting and criminalizing. and then about $500 million in tax revenues. So for something that's been ignored for decades now, as far as public school funding goes, and the income, everything that we need to bring down property taxes, a new influx of new sources of revenue streams, like taxing dollars on marijuana. I think that'll help tons. I think new housing, I mentioned earlier, there's a shortage in housing in Collin County. We build more homes, then we're not going to see bidding wars. It's very simple. Less bidding wars means people are paying closer to what the actual market value, appraised values of homes is, and that's going to bring property taxes back down to normal growth.
Well, in Texas, we have a church on every street corner.
Yeah.
Especially in the Bible Belt area where I live. I mean, I can throw a rock and hit probably 5 churches from where I'm sitting. So we don't drink and we don't smoke marijuana in Texas. So I don't know how that, I'm being a little sarcastic there. And so we don't gamble, we don't drink, and we don't smoke marijuana. So I don't, so how can that even bring any kind of revenue into the state of Texas if we don't do any of those things, right? And so having said that, Senate Bill 1 talks about how they're reducing taxes and how they're reducing taxes across the state. And if you take a look at that Senate bill and you kind of do a little research, it shows the people that are going to lose, that they're going to gain from that are people in the $156,000 tax bracket per year. That's how much they have to make per year, and you gain about $116. Okay, now 60% of Texans that make between $31,000 and $156,000, they're going to lose $35 a year. So tell me how many people reside in those two categories, and who's going to benefit most from the tax breaks that they are proposing? Well, it's not me and you, and so there's a very small percentage of people that tend to gain. Businesses tend to gain, but who's going to end up taking the brunt of that is the consumer, because they're going to pass it down to the consumer, and the price is going to go up. You're going to pay less in wages, but you're going to pay more in sales tax. So I guess it's just the way you frame things. I think that to seek out methods of bringing income in. I mean, in Lubbock, Texas, in Lubbock County, we have those 8-liners all up and down a highway, but we don't gamble in Texas, and so I'm not understanding how we kind of talking out of both sides of our mouth. I mean, so I think Beto has the right idea. I don't know how you have people in prison for a life sentence when several of our states in the union are allowing doctors to leave the profession and become entrepreneurs in the area of marijuana. So I don't know. I just think that we have our head in the sand, and I think we need to be proactive instead of reactive to what's going on in the country.
Yeah, reactive, definitely. History has said that Texas is reactionary. And that's the thing. Like Beto said, we spend $500,000 a year in taxpayer money to incarcerate people who are in jail for low levels of possession of cannabis. So building houses, and it actually surprises me, because I sold and bought a house in 2017, and the bidding war that you mentioned, Kevin, I mean, that was kind of what I experienced in 2017, and I'm just surprised 5 years later, it has not let up, and there's no sign of it letting up. So we build more houses. I mean, where do we build these houses? I know there's a lot of rural areas we build them in. But I don't know, you guys, you tell me.
Well, building the houses is a good question, but being that Texas tends to be a little bit reactionary, it leads to other questions. So if we're going to build more homes, which they're doing in certain areas of Collin County, in Princeton, there's homes, 250 homes a week that are going up and being built and moved into.
Oh,
It's crazy growth. But then what do you do about infrastructure? Because now we're going to have all these homes and we're getting people places to live, but then we have roads that are too narrow to handle the traffic, and it takes an hour for some, to get a place that should take 20 minutes. So we've got to be cognizant of things like infrastructure as we build these homes. We need to, Collin County especially, we need to make sure that we're addressing infrastructure to add as the growth is coming, not later than the growth comes, because that's what we've done in a lot of areas, and the traffic situations are very concerning. So I want to work with all the county leaders, local government, local leadership, as this moves forward, just to make sure that we're being cognizant of some of these other outlying issues that need to be addressed, as well as the property taxes.
okay. So, John, the county commissioners, what do they do, as far as the tax rate? They set the tax rate, is that right?
Well, the LCAD does that. The appraisal district does that.
Okay.
And of course, we have systems in place where the individual property owner can go and obviously debate your dispute your appraisal. But like Kevin said, the Lubbock area is kind of growing in leaps and bounds. It just and so what it's done to people, for example, I'm gonna talk about Lubbock Cooper, which is it's a community that's just kind of grown and it went from a community of about 6,000.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at maybe they had like 1,200 students in the school system, to a district that has now between, I'm going to say it's in the largest school district. It's like a 6A school now, fixed and built a second high school. And it's grown probably within the last 5 years. So what it's done to people that live in that area, you have a home that is and I had a home actually that was right next door to the school, and they tore that school down, built a brand new school. And for my property tax value went from probably $50,000 home, hadn't done one thing to that house. And now the house is valued at $150,000 because of the popularity of that school district.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to go to that school. That school district is that's where everybody wants to be. And so those individuals that have a humble home there, now they're struggling with having to pay their taxes, and it's almost a form of gentrification, really, because they're not going to be able to afford to live in the homes that they were living in that they haven't done anything to. As far as people say, well, you added a room, or you made the house nicer, and so that's why we have to. Well, they've not done anything to their homes, and yet now their property value is just shot off the roof.
Right.
So,
And we're seeing all over Texas and lower income areas that people are literally being taxed out of their homes, and they're being forced to move because they cannot afford the tax bill, and property that they own outright. That's just, just not right.
and so that's and when you have a school district within your where you live that's a hot ticket, they're going to buy your home overnight. You know what I mean? I mean, I sold my home to the school district because I was like, I'm not going to pay these kind of taxes. I mean, I'll sell it to you for what you appraise it at, and so now I'm out. I mean, I'm not gonna wait around for me to default on my taxes or to pay an outrageous amount when I'm renting that house and I'm not even making what you're charging me. So it doesn't make sense, and a lot of people are kind of up in arms because this is a rural country bumpkin community that's now a suburban community with doctors, lawyers, and businessmen that own $1 million homes around there now, and so just changes the whole complexion and changes the whole dynamic of the community.
Both of you bring up good points as far as people being priced out of their homes. One of my biggest concerns in Collin County is teachers being priced out of their districts, because when you're dealing with teachers that are paid the way that Texas teachers are, and you're dealing with skyrocketing property values in Collin County, we have teachers that aren't going to be. I've spoken to teachers that can't afford to live here anymore. They've been priced out of their homes. And now we're going to ask teachers, on top of everything else that they do to educate, to drive an hour and a half into work both ways. It's such an unfortunate situation, and we do need answers.
Transparency and answers. Yeah, absolutely. And so do you think that, or do both of y'all think that the tax situation largely benefits people in Texas who are, maybe like the 1% or even like the 10%, but large in part hurt lower income people?
Absolutely. I think the lower wages that we're paying people that are working, and then the businesses, they're the ones that are going to be benefiting most from those tax cuts, the proposed tax cuts, and then you're talking about higher prices that you're paying at the store, and then the lower wages you're paying those individuals. It's unsustainable, and something's going to have to give at some point.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. I know that we're kind of getting short on time, and just a couple things before we wrap up. Kevin, if you're elected and you go to the legislator, what do you think you could do to alleviate some of the tax-paying headache from homeowners in Texas?
The first thing is I'm going to work closely with our local officials here in Collin County. I want to make sure that I bring what I can as a legislator to the local level to make sure that they're paying attention to the right issues instead of ignoring some of these things. Let's focus on how we can bring in more housing, how we can build more. I know that we're already building at a high rate, but do we need to look at what we're building? Do we need to look at, are we building too many homes, not enough apartment complexes? People look at apartment complexes as a bad thing in some of the areas of Collin County. And when you're dealing with as much growth as we have, I think that it's an equitable way of bringing in the people. There's just so many different aspects of what needs to be addressed. But working with the local officials is definitely something that, I'm going to be available for. I'm going to commit myself to transparency so that, unlike my current state representative, when you do have a question, something that you would like to be addressed, I'm going to represent everybody here in this district, and I'm going to push forward different types of legislation. I'm going to be working with Democratic colleagues and Republican colleagues to find the legislation that is actually going to bring us transparency and bring us answers. I'm not going to pretend that I have the answer and let's go just do legalization of marijuana and call it a day, because that's not there. There's no single solution for everything that we're facing right now.
It's a puzzle and everything is a piece.
Yeah.
So John, if you were elected to the county commissioner in Lubbock County, what do you think that your role would be to, help educate taxpayers, or you tell me?
Absolutely. I think that, I'm a data person. The numbers kind of tell a story, and it's hard to argue with numbers. And whether you're talking about numbers in appraisals, or numbers in infrastructure, and what you're spending on infrastructure, or what you're not spending on infrastructure, and then where are you spending that money? And so I think that doing research, showing the data, showing the true numbers, and sharing that, in making, because sometimes communities like mine, the people that live here, they're just not aware. They're not aware of really what's going on. They see that, they just go and they say, okay, well, it's just, it's just the way it is, and there's nothing we can do about it. And I think that it's important that we educate our constituents, educate the people that are outside our circle, to make them understand how it's affecting everyone, and how it's affecting the guy that lives on on the poor side of town, and in government housing, and how does it affect just everybody across the board. And I think you have to do it with research and numbers and data, and allow them to see how it's affecting everyone across the board. And it's just not one constituent that it's affecting, but everyone.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you guys coming on here today and, talking a little bit more about this tax situation. You guys, if you haven't got your tax assessment in the mail yet, I'm sure it's going to be coming in the next week or two. Just make sure you're sitting down when you read it. So, all right. Well, I really appreciate you guys, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle, for having me.
Thank you for having us.